I guess I'll focus in on an area you would really be an expert on, which is, do the clinicians trust the record they're looking at? Do they trust that they have the information they need, or do they just assume when they're sitting in front of the patient, I'm going to have to ask these questions again because it may or may not have all the information I need. I may need to ask them, have you been in another country? Have you been visiting other hospitals? Do they trust the record they're looking at? Or do they feel like they need to augment it?
Well, I think there are a variety of, there's not one answer to that, for sure. I would say that in some cases, I feel like they trust it too much. So if it's in the record, it must be true without actually validating that the data is accurate with the patient. In some cases, I feel like it has to do with how the clinicians were trained. If you're trained, aside from the EHR, you're trained that in order for you to know this is valid information, you have to ask the questions. Yeah. That regardless of what's in the EHR, those clinicians are going to ask the questions. And I would say that we need to do a better job at teaching and educating and training our clinicians, all clinicians, on how to interact with a patient and technology, whether it's, the EHR or some other technology in the environment that touches the patient. I think that we don't always do a good job. We say, okay, here are the buttons you have to push, and we put people in a classroom and they go through functional training. And in some cases, they're good about a workflow. Here's how you admit a patient. Here's how you transfer a patient. Here's how you place an order, those kinds of functional things. But we don't do enough of teaching how clinicians can interact with patients. And I think that you can get to a place where you can validate the information with the patient, and how you approach the patient says a couple of different things to the patient, right? So it says, I see here you're allergic to penicillin and you get a rash. Is that correct? Right? That does two things. One, you're validating with the patient. The second, to the patient, it says, oh, they know me. They have my data, right? And we don't always do that. We don't do a good job of that at all.
Yeah. Well, I've had some physicians say to me, I don't trust anything that's in there. I validate it all. And to a certain extent, I get that and I understand it. But I've also had physicians tell me, when we talk about fire and those kind of things, that's a techie way of saying, hey, we could put plumbing in place to move stuff around. But at the end of the day, I've had physicians look at me and go, they'll say, look over my shoulder, watch this. And they'll show me just all these CCDAs have come across, and they're going, and it's just like a file folder with 1,000 documents in it. They're like, which one do I have to read? He goes, if it's in the EHR, I technically have to look at all of them. I'm like, there has to be a better way than having 1,000 documents in here that are essentially PDF documents. And I'm going, anything in there I need? No. Anything in there I need? Now I know they get classified and those kind of things. And I'm sort of setting a worst case example, but so we get the plumbing in place, we're moving the data around, but until we get to discrete data elements moving around, it's still going to remain hard for those physicians to digest all that information. To a certain extent, do you hear physicians complaining? I think I hear some of them complaining. It's like, all right, I have too much information right now. Too much information without meaning, I guess, is the answer.
Yeah, I think that nurses and physicians, you would hear that from. And I think that really, this is where I believe that there's a role for augmented intelligence or artificial intelligence to help cull out those meaningful data elements and bring them to the forefront, right? So that we do a better job of dashboarding, if you will, that says, in the background, have the computer and the technology do the searching and find those critical data elements. And then in the foreground, you as a clinician, show me what's important, what I should be looking at. And we don't do enough of that from a technological standpoint. it also goes back to my very first comments around really needing, highly evolved and talented, folks on your informatics and IT team.